Welcome to Saltgrass, Turning the Goldfields Green, a show all about how local communities can engage with the climate crisis at a grassroots level. This episode is all about solar bulk buying and getting more solar onto household rooftops. Joe Capdean coordinates a not-for-profit project called MASH, More Australian Solar Homes. We talk about why household solar is such a great way to get renewable energy at a community-wide scale happening quickly and also makes sense for the individual household. Saltgrass is produced in Castlemaine on Jara country, home of the Dja Dja Wurrung. We pay respects to elders past, present and emerging.
Salt.
Salt of the earth.
Salt. Salt.
Salt. Grassroots.
Grassroots.
Salt of the earth people. Grassroots change. Saltgrass.
Listen to all episodes of Turning the Goldfields Green on saltgrass.podbean.com. I work at MASG, which is the Mount Alexander Sustainability Group, and we often get phone calls of people who want to talk to MASH, which is the More Australian Solar Homes. Is that right? The acronym?
Correct. That's right. Yes.
And because we're both started and associated a lot in our local small town of Castlemaine in central Victoria, we both came out of the same sort of movement and time period in our town of sustainability and lots of projects getting up and started. So the two organisations have a lot of people in town get us confused, and they call MASG when they want to ask questions about MASH, which we're very happy to forward people, and we give them the correct phone number. But it's
fantastic. You're like our call centre. Terrific.
Yeah, that's right. So tell us a little bit how MASH actually started.
MASH started in mid-2014. And it was a project of the Hub Foundation, and the Hub Foundation had literally just been set up, was set up at that time, and the first project of it was to, do a solar bulk buy, and the idea was just to do it in Castlemaine, and it was the idea of Neil and Heather Barrett, who had been involved in the Mount Alexander Sustainability Group.
They were the founders, really, of the Mount Alexander Sustainability Group.
Yeah, that's right. So really passionate environmentalists, and really sort of worked super hard and put all their, skills and expertise into the movement, really. And then I think they thought, well, let's do something new, something fresh. And there had been, I think, very successful bulk buy, which was that Solar Cities program, I think around sort of 2012. And it was very, very successful. And it was the time when the government had the premium feed-in tariff, so people were very excited about putting on what was at the time, solar systems. They were the early adopters, and they're putting on typically like 1.5 kilowatt to 3 kilowatt systems.
That's me. I did that exactly then, and I just snuck in. I snuck in with that 66-cent tariff, which has been amazing. It paid for the panels plus some, honestly.
Yeah.
But the government quickly realised how many people wanted to get solar on their roofs and withdrew it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it was just an amazing deal, and for people who got it, they're still on it, which is incredible. I might be completely wrong, but I think that was the first bulk buy in this town in Castlemaine.
Yeah, and that was linked to a university study as well. And MASG also attempted to get a solar farm up. And we've also attempted in our past to get a wind farm up, and both of them fell down because I think they were just a bit too early. Even just by a year or two, they were a bit too early, and people weren't ready, and there were a lot of objections to council, and they just didn't get up. But I think that's where the power of MASH comes in, because MASH is it's not asking for a whole farm to be translated into solar panels. It's just asking for existing roof space and to get everyday people involved.
So the idea was just to do, a little bulk buy, and thought, well, there's been, a few years between the previous bulk buy, that Solar Cities one. Maybe there's time, a good time to do another one. That was the idea, I think, that Neil and Heather had. So they set up the Hub Foundation as the kind of the vehicle for doing it, and I was taken on a sort of casual basis, just to, I guess, be the legs on the ground, doing the hard yakka, and it was a lot of fun. We set it up, and it was that classic bulk buy in the sense that let's find people who are interested, collect their expressions of interest, and then once we've got enough people ready to go, then place an order through a solar supplier and get, a delivery of heaps of panels and inverters, and then get them installed. And we thought the target would be 50 solar systems. And we got there. And I remember the time when that big truck came down from the solar wholesaler from Sydney, and Neil arranged for a great big MASH banner to be put on the truck just as it was on the outside of Castlemaine. And then the truck rolled into town with the banner, and it was a, really, really exciting moment. And the people who had ordered the 50 systems, some of them had turned up to kind of, celebrate that moment. And that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
And so, of course, the benefit of a bulk buy is that you all collectively benefit from getting cheaper panels because you're buying a whole big bunch of them.
Yeah, that was the original idea, and that is still the case, that, because of the number of people ordering the solar, we can get better prices. But I think as we've moved along and learnt over the last 6 years, that there's a lot more to it than just the price. Solar is also about the quality, and it's about the service.
So repair and maintenance and things like that, is that what you mean?
Well, there's a lot of steps in the process of just installing solar, because you're dealing with the network distributor, which is PowerCore. You're dealing with the electricity retailers. So that's just in terms of getting the system set up for the feed-in tariff.
So just to be clear for the audience, PowerCore is the overall energy provider, but the retailers are the one who you get your bills through and pay your money to.
Yeah.
But they all work with PowerCore to provide you energy.
Yes, that's right. So all that, there's a lot of paperwork involved in just setting up a solar system.
And it's a lot of stuff that people just don't want to deal with, isn't it? It's a headache.
Yeah, that's right. And it's got to be a nice, smooth process. Otherwise, it can really cause a lot of frustration. So one thing I'm really keen on is finding solar suppliers who've got that administrative capability, so that it just is kind of like no hassle for the people who are buying the systems. And then, of course, there's a lot of rules and regulations, quite rightly, around solar and how it's installed. So they've really kind of, I think, tightened up. The regulators have tightened up about, how solar should be installed, just to make sure that it's obviously safe as a starting point. Everything is done electrically in the right way. So there's a lot more safety rules that have come in the last few years, and it's really important that you get a solar retailer and installers who are absolutely spot on with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think price is one thing, but yeah, I mean, as in anything you buy that's a big deal, particularly relating to your house, the service side's really important.
Absolutely. So how has MASH grown over the years? Because I know that you're no longer with the Hub Foundation.
Oh, right. So in terms of the ownership of MASH, it was with the Hub Foundation until I think it was 2018. And at that time then, Neil and Heather Barrett were getting into the development of the paddock, which was their, I guess, an eco-development in Castlemaine, which was their own kind of private initiative. And that was obviously, it is a very, very big project, a very exciting project, but it was just taking a huge amount of their time. And they were starting to think, gosh, I'm not sure if we've got the time to also, do the management of MASH and, all the paperwork that's involved with that and all the rest of it. And then the Central Victorian Greenhouse Alliance had a new executive officer at the time, so Rob Law, and he was interested in the MASH project sort of moving into the CVGA as just another service, if you like, that could be offered to the CVGA client base, which is the councils in this part of Victoria. So it kind of worked, kind of met the needs for the CVGA. It was like an extra service they could offer. And also because Neil and Heather were moving and focusing more on the paddock, that kind of worked too. So it was good timing.
Yeah, great. And so the CVGA is an alliance of councils really who are all working together almost to do similar things like bulk buys and help each other all achieve sustainability goals by collaborating together. And it's a lot of councils, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 13 councils. So it's councils everywhere from Ararat and the Macedon Ranges, Shire and Hepburn Shire, and obviously Mount Alexander Shire, all the way up to Mildura. So it's really a massive area.
And so does that mean MASH is now servicing that many councils, or is it just a slow creep? Because I know you're now next door in Hepburn, but I wasn't sure how far afield you'd started to go.
A slow creep is like, it reminds me of something perhaps not so nice. Like
I was thinking more along like a vine in the garden.
Oh, beautiful. That's a nice way of thinking.
Yep.
Yeah, look, yes, that's right. So the MASH bulk buy is being made available to new councils in the region. It's not all of them by any means, because every time we go into a new council area, it involves a lot of close working with that council and maybe the local sustainability group in that shire. And I think every sort of, I'm learning that every shire has its own particular profile, its own needs, its own community, and that it's so important just to work with that community and understand
where they're at.
How it works and the demographic. And so MASH has moved into the Swan Hill region, and that's been a lot of fun. We actually call it the Mallee Sun Solar Bog Buy because we wanted people to sort of identify with it as their own thing, and that's in conjunction with the Swan Hill Rural City Council. And that's involved a bit of travel, of course, before COVID, because we started it last year, and going up to Swan Hill and meeting the people there, and also doing, talking solar to farmers as well. So I've been to Robinvale, I've been talking to almond growers and, orange growers, and because there's heaps and heaps of farming up there. So some big solar as well. But just more solar on homes. And I think there people are very much, it's all about, knowing people and meeting people face to face. It's that kind of community, and they just love that, face-to-face contact. And then, if they hear that their neighbours got it and if it's been a good experience, that's everything. That really, really counts. So yeah, and there we use a local installer who's also one of the local footy stars.
Great. Never hurts.
Yeah, well, that's good, and that's working really, really well. So yeah,
great. So let's talk about why it's important to get solar onto rooftops in terms of climate change and the climate crisis, and how we really have to move to renewable energies quickly in lots of ways, including wind and solar farms and biodigesters and whatever else people are coming up with. But let's talk about why solar on rooftops is so important.
Well, solar on rooftops really just makes sense because you're generating clean electricity for the point where it's going to be used. So it's very, very efficient. It means that you don't have to bring in electricity from, hundreds of kilometres away, from, coal-fired power stations that are a long, long way away. Just putting aside the fact that obviously coal-fired power stations are a dirty form of power, but it's also the inefficiency with transmission. So local generation is really, really important. And that's where, anything that's local generation that's clean has got to be a good thing.
Because power is lost as it travels per kilometre, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And I never really appreciated that. I didn't know that until I started working for MASH because, my background, I didn't really know much about solar. And when I learned that, I thought, wow, that just makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Put it, on your roof because you're going to be using it in your home. So, there is still always a little bit of loss, between the power being generated by the panels, and there's still a bit of loss between that and then what you can actually use in the home, but it's minimal compared to the loss that happens when it's travelling on the lines all the way from the coal stations.
The Latrobe Valley to central Victoria, yeah. Or even from a wind farm down on the Otways to central Victoria. That's a long way for electricity to travel. And to think that we even lose some power, even as it's travelling like 2 metres between the solar panel and the inverter and then to the kettle is interesting, yeah.
I mean, it's like you think about food miles and you go, well, I want to produce my food locally. I want food that's produced locally. I mean, most people kind of get that concept. Well, it's the same with your energy. Why not produce it locally?
Yeah, and so it's not just about how much power you're using and how big your power bill is. If you're looking at your carbon footprint, we probably should be calculating how much power is lost as it travels to the house and include that on our carbon footprint.
Yeah. And I think that's something that is calculated when the feed-in tariff is calculated, and that's what it should be. So the Essential Services Commission looks at all that kind of thing, and they look at what is the cost of energy being transported, if you like, from remote sources to the home, and then what's the benefit if it's generated instead at the home or locally. And that's one of the reasons why they were put into their calculation for working out what the feed-in tariff should be.
Historically, solar used to be really expensive and only people who were very proactive and very passionate about solar would invest in it. And knowing that it would become cheaper over time as technology does, but it's now become pretty affordable for people to tap into it for an average sort of person. But what are some of the barriers that people face when it comes to investing in solar in their homes?
Well, first there could be, I guess, a sort of physical barrier in the sense that if the home is very shaded, then it's probably not going to be suitable for solar. Depends on the degree of shading. So there's that kind of just, I guess, physical thing that you do need the sun on your roof.
Yeah.
And
yep.
if you do live somewhere that's really in the bush or whatever, and obviously everyone loves their trees, that's one thing. Another one might be the nature of the ownership of the property. So if it's a tenanted property, then it's definitely a lot harder for whatever reason. I think there's a variety of reasons to get that solar on that roof.
Yeah, so if you don't own the property, it's tricky.
Well, look, there is a state government rebate for tenanted properties now, but it's the landlord who's got to basically sign up to it.
Which makes sense.
Obviously, with the agreement of the tenant, so there needs to be a formal agreement in place. But for whatever reason, we could talk about that too, it's just not as popular as solar on owner-occupied dwellings. And I just think that's a big shame.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think it's because landlords don't actually see the benefit of the lesser electricity bill? It's the tenants who see the benefit.
Yeah. So the landlord doesn't have to pay the bill. It's the tenant who pays the bill. And I guess the cost of the system is the landlord's responsibility. With the new state rebate, the landlord would get the rebate of $1,850 off the cost of the solar system in the same way that people who own and occupy their property get. And in addition, there's an interest-free loan also of $1,850. And so together, the two things really completely slash the cost of solar. And it is possible for the landlord to negotiate an agreement with the tenant whereby the tenant pays up to half the cost of that interest-free loan. So when you look at the numbers, it does really work. It's just, I guess, something the landlord's got to really want to do.
And I guess for the tenant as well, if they're really confident that their electricity bills will go right down, helping pay for the panels might actually be a cost-effective thing for them. It's not that like they're paying for something that they don't get to reap the benefits of.
No. So when you look at the numbers, the monthly repayment for the tenant would be a maximum of $20 a month. And if your bill savings by having the solar are greater than $20 a month, then, you're winning. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty simple.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, because I think people who are renting don't even think about even approaching a landlord about getting solar because intuitively you think there's nothing to make either of you want to do that, really.
Yeah, well, we're trying to encourage it. So at the moment, working with Cantwell Property, who have, quite a lot of landlords on their books, and just trying to raise awareness of it through the landlords.
And those state government incentives are such a strong thing. Like,
Oh,
that's
for
brilliant.
sure. They're
It's
really,
really
really
good.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was chatting to you before we started the interview, you mentioned something called the solar coaster. And I think these sort of incentives as they come and go is exactly what you were referring to. Tell us about the solar coaster.
Oh gosh, the solar coaster is the kind of when I started in solar 6 years ago, I had no idea that solar was such an up and down industry. And when the ups and downs first started happening, well, the downs in particular, I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe, government policy. Sometimes it's amazing and things just really just swing along and it's just fabulous and people really loving solar and going for it. But when it goes wrong, like, there's maybe something in terms of maybe there's not enough rebates, or the process for getting the rebates is tricky for people, then, oh my God, the drama, and it's really, it is drama for a lot of people, and we're there to help, of course.
Yeah.
So, I hear the stories and we do our best, but at the end of the day, if, for instance, if there's greater demand for a rebate than there is supply, as it is at the moment with the battery rebate, then it's just really unfortunate. Yeah, because people get caught up in that, have their heart set on maybe getting a battery with the rebate, and then they go through the process, and the process is, big hassle for them, and it's not a good experience.
Yeah, sure. So I think batteries is also something that's really come forward in recent years. Like, previously, batteries weren't as efficient as they are now and couldn't store as much power, and they were also very, very expensive. So it just didn't seem worth it. So tell us how batteries have changed over time.
Batteries are still expensive, so I'll start with
Yeah,
that.
sure.
I wish they weren't so expensive. Everyone's sort of hoping that the price will come down. The price is still up there. But having said that, the interest in battery storage is phenomenally high, and that has been the case for the last few years, certainly the last 3 or 4 years. And that's fantastic. People, I think, just love the idea of greater energy self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
And that's just incredibly popular. The price, for instance, for a Tesla Powerwall, which is the battery that we offer through the MASH project, is around about $15,000 installed.
$15,000. That's
I reckon
so
that's
much
a
money.
lot of money. I mean, that's not including the solar, right?
Yeah, wow.
That is just the battery.
That is huge.
It's huge, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's huge. There is a battery rebate, which brings it down by just over $4,000. So as you can imagine, that's really popular.
Yeah, but when you hear the rebates $4,000, you know the total cost is going to be a lot.
It's still just over 10,000. I'm absolutely, to be honest, gobsmacked that people are still like buying them. So this time last year, we probably only sold maybe 5 Tesla Powerwalls. I don't know, something like that. Not a lot. In the last 3 months, we've sold now over 30.
Just in 3 months.
Yeah.
So people are obviously seeing them as worthwhile.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there's all sorts of reasons why people do them, but I would never say do it if you're really just hoping to cut your electricity bill in half or anything, because it just won't. Probably being really controversial right now, but I mean, it might help in some cases, but the payback is still over 10 years for most people, quite a lot over 10 years, and the warranty is 10 years. So I think that equation needs to kind of change before it becomes super popular.
So what does it allow for people to do, though, when they get a battery? How does it change how they use electricity?
With a battery, I think one big reason why people like a battery, particularly the Tesla Powerwall, because it can do it, is it provides protection in the case of a power outage, whether it be a blackout or just a small outage, which is like a brownout. And those outages are becoming increasingly common where the grid's a bit weaker. So the grid's not like perfect right across the board. There's areas where it's stronger, and there's other areas where it's weaker. So if you live in one of those areas where it's weaker and you really, for whatever reason, really want power security for your home, so you might be I don't know, you might have water pumps that are important because maybe you're a farm or maybe...
Or even in the case of a bushfire, you need to have
Exactly.
electricity that's not grid connected.
Yeah, that's it. And so that's a really good example, and for a number of the systems that have been purchased, that's been the reason. So people have done it either because they want to be able to protect their property if a bushfire comes, so they can run their water pumps to help put out the fire. Or we've also done them for safety in an area. So the Hepburn Recreation Reserve is an example. So if there's a bushfire, it's a community safe place. Yeah, they call it safer place.
Yeah, they can't guarantee anything, can they?
No. So they're through our community bonus kitty, and also with the support of Hepburn Wind and Hepburn Shire Council and a grant from Bank Australia, we've put on a solar system with a Tesla Powerwall, which means that if there is a bushfire and the power goes out, that place can still have electricity, so they can run, the lights and the fridges and just provide the comfort for people, just still having the power.
If they've all retreated there during an extreme bushfire event.
Yeah, and the same with the Malmesbury Fire Station, the CFA. So that's the same. They've, through our community bonus and also a Bank Australia grant, and with the support of the Sustainable Malmesbury, and so all those groups coming together, again, they've got that same sort of system, solar plus a Tesla Powerwall.
So tell me a bit about this community work. I was going to ask you that next anyway, so that's a good segue.
Yeah, well, we do it in two ways. One way is that 1% of the sales revenue that goes through the bulk buy, we put into a kitty, which we call our community bonus pot, if you like, and then we record which shires it comes from. So we can say, okay, in Mount Alexander and Macedon ranges, we've had this much revenue go through the project, therefore 1% of it goes into the kitty, and we will then put a call out through the local paper like the Midland Express, and maybe through MAS as well, and councils, and say, okay, community groups and schools, if you think you could benefit from some solar, put your hands up. Here's the application form, here's the criteria, here's the deadline. We'd love to hear from you if you'd like some solar. So we put a call out every so often, and we receive applications for solar, and that's always really good. And I always wish we had more money to give away because there's always such strong applications.
So how many places have you done that with, do you reckon?
I think it's now about 16, and I know, just looking at the numbers yesterday, that we'll be able to announce another tranche of money to give out to community groups. And most of those have been in the Mount Alexander Shire and Macedon and Hepburn areas. We have done one so far in the Swan Hill area, which was for a disability service group. Sorry, it's my dog barking. That's Ziggy in the background. And one that we're installing at the moment is the Woodend Neighbourhood House. And that's, I think, 10 kilowatt system, and that's also in conjunction with Macedon Ranges Sustainability Group. So that one should be going in shortly.
Yeah, that's great. And so overall, with MASH, how many homes have you put solar panels onto? Like what difference has MASH done in the 6 years that you've been in operation?
Yeah, well, overall, it's over 1,500 solar homes.
That's amazing.
That we've done. Yeah, thank you. And I've just looked at the numbers, and while we haven't got absolutely accurate numbers for some of our earlier bulk buys, it looks like in the Mount Alexander Shire, it's around about 700 to 750 homes that have been installed with solar through MASH since 2014, and that is around about 3 megawatt of solar. So it is a mount of a small solar farm, and that's good news, I think.
Did you say there was a second way that you give back to the community?
Yeah. So I'm also really excited about the other way that we give, and that's really as a kind of a facilitator for systems. So we then look for money through grants. So as I said, there was a Bank Australia one, which was a big grant, I think around about $30,000 that the Central Victorian Greenhouse Alliance applied for with specific solar projects in mind. And then once we get that money, that sort of acts as seed money to then get money from, other sources to make bigger solar systems. And that's how we managed to get the money to put those 2 big solar and battery systems in. They're pretty expensive. They're big ticket items. And that was really, really good. And then I guess the other way is working with PowerShop, who have a community stream. If you buy, I can't quite remember what they call it, but there's a power pack you can choose to buy through PowerShop, where that extra money that you pay per kilowatt hour goes straight into community solar projects. And through that, we've done solar on Corinna, which is the childcare service on Templeton Street in Castlemaine, and that was a lovely installation. And also we've done a really big one at the Social Foundry in Kyneton, which, if you don't know that, just go check them out. It's an amazing not-for-profit social enterprise, and it's helping get young people upskilled and into the workplace. And they do awesome work, and they also have a great cafe. It's probably doing takeaway at the moment, but great cafe, beautiful site, and we did 20 kilowatt there. Yeah, so that was really good. So yeah, I love that kind of work too, because you can get some quite big systems on, and that otherwise might not happen.
Yeah. And so you guys are a not-for-profit as well. Tell us a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, so MASH is not an organisation. MASH is just a project. The organisation is the Central Victorian Greenhouse Alliance, and the Central Victorian Greenhouse Alliance is a not-for-profit organisation, and it owns MASH. So that's kind of how it works. Yeah. I guess the purpose of the Central Victorian Greenhouse Alliance is to help create or help move this whole region towards greater use of renewable energy. So that's the reason CVGA exists, and to support councils to make that happen. So that's really what CVGA is about. And so MASH is just sort of falls naturally into, I guess, that mission. So it fits really well, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what made you get involved with MASH, and I guess maybe what I'm really asking is, what has it changed how you feel about climate change to work with? Because you said earlier that you didn't know that much about solar when you started.
No, no.
It changed? Has it changed how you feel about climate change and renewable energy working at MASH?
Yeah, it's certainly given me a much greater awareness of all the issues. I mean, I grew up in a household that was very environmental, very much greeny. My dad was, the ultimate khaki wearing greeny kind of bush guy. We go bush holidays all the time. We had the composting going and all sorts of things, just camping all the time. And, my dad wrote a PhD on renewable energy. He wrote that in the 70s and 80s. And through that, they knew the Barretts. So it was there was a family connection. But I was always a bit like, oh God, that's my dad. He's just got this, pet subject. I was a bit turned off because it was so intense. Then I guess it's sort of been interesting. I've kind of come to full circle, and I have a child now, and I understand that it's important that, we do work to make the future as bright as possible for the next generation and the generations to come. And part of that is making sure, or doing what we can to, I guess, leave the world in a good state, a clean state, and climate change is obviously a huge, huge issue. So I'm really pleased to be working in the area. But what really appealed to me about MASH, there's a number of things. One is that it's working in the local community, which I love. So I'm very pleased and very happy to be living here in Castlemaine. I think it's a great community, and people are so into it and so friendly and supportive. I'm very practical, and I love the fact that with MASH you get fast results. Like, you can get the solar on real quick. And I love the idea of the big projects, solar farms and all that, but I just think I'm a bit too impatient for them because
Sure.
they take so long to get off the ground.
Yeah, it takes years of planning and getting permits and rallying the money and getting the community on board. It's a big deal.
And I'm not so really into administration, to be honest, and paperwork and all that. It just drives me nuts. And so I just love the fact that with residential solar in particular, it happens really quickly, if everything's going well. For instance, in the last 3 months, we've taken now over 0.5 megawatt of orders in solar. That's 3 months. It's 0.5 megawatt, and that's in the Mount Alexander Shire and Macedon Ranges and a bit in the Hepburn Shire. So that's amazing, and that's really fast, and that's going on right now. So over half of that's been installed. and that's what we need, because we're talking climate change and it's happening quickly. And we need a mix of stuff that's fast and a mix of those big ticket items that are obviously slow burners. And that's what I liked about MASH. And I think that was probably one of the big reasons why Neil and Heather wanted to do, residential solar bulk buy, because they're similar. They wanted to, they're like impatient. Climate change is happening. We need to do things that make results now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's brilliant.
I love it that so much solar's going on. I would just love to see more solar going on for people who are struggling to afford it. So I'm just personally a bit concerned about that sort of potentially that energy divide between the rich and the poor.
That's a really good point.
So, I love it that, and whoever gets solar, I think that's fantastic, all good. But I just love to see more people who perhaps, are struggling a bit more with their income or whatever, to think about solar, because now with the rebates, it is possible to get solar installed for, not a big system, but maybe 3 kilowatt system, get it installed for, a few $100s. That's what it is. And then you've got a $40 a month interest-free loan for 4 years. And I think if you just say it like that, nice and simple, you go, okay, we've just gone through a winter. It's been pretty cold here in Castlemaine. Costs a lot typically to heat houses. And I would just love it to see more people being able to be comfortable through the winter, because they're not worried about putting their electricity on to heat the home.
And the fact is that if people are too poor to be able to afford solar, they then will have larger electricity bills because they're going, so it's actually, I think you're right about the financial unevenness of it. It's like the people who can afford to install solar then get cheaper bills, and they probably need the cheaper bills less than the people who can't afford solar.
Yeah. And then I think it's a perception thing, and that's what I just try to do. Because my background is in, marketing communications, and it's just to try and get across the message that right now, actually, you don't need a whole pile of cash to get some solar installed. And it's a decent solar system too. And so, and then, at the end of the day, you're going to be benefiting longer term from those lower bills, and you'll be more comfortable.
Yeah, all of those things, definitely. How do you see, I guess you're seeing it up in Swan Hill, is the slow evolution of different parts of Australian society who are adjusting to the idea of you can have solar on your roof. How hard is it to get people who are really unused to it to accept it? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Look, there's a really amazing fact I just found. It's like 27% of all Australian homes now have solar. So when I started, it was like, that was 6 years ago, it was more like 15%. So it's really becoming mainstream. And the reason why it's becoming mainstream is because people just see that it's financially it's a good thing, because it's cutting their bills. So, and that goes right across like the political divide. So when we work in Swan Hill, obviously they vote differently from down here in Mount Alexander Shire, but they still really get solar. They totally get it, and they're right into it.
Because it makes sense economically as well as...
Yeah. They love, all sorts of reasons, and there's lots of people there who do it for the green reasons too. But we ask that question every time people, request a quote through our bulk buy. Why do you want to do this? What's your reasons? And I would say just everywhere people will say, yeah, because I want to cut my electricity bill. Fair enough. Who wouldn't?
Yeah, exactly.
And then sort of allied to that, because I know then I'm doing something to help the environment, to reduce my carbon footprint. And also, I like to do something that I feel like I'm giving back to the community, because I know that there will be a benefit to the community with some free solar going on. So I think people like that sort of, do it for a number of reasons. The people who just say, I just really want to put a power station on my roof, because I want to be generating lots of clean energy. I think they were probably the early adopters. But now we're into, I guess, that the mainstream and maybe the late majority, if you like, or whatever you call it, on the curve. And now it's just like anything, when the price comes down, people see the benefits and they go for it.
That was Joe Capteen talking about household solar, bulk buys, renewable energy in general, and the not-for-profit organisation she coordinates called MASH, More Australian Solar Homes. It is worth noting, of course, that there are many retailers and providers for solar panels if you do want to invest in some, and they can all help you navigate and access government subsidies on solar. Always do your research and always get more than one quote. My name is Alison Hanley, and you have been listening to Saltgrass Turning the Goldfields Green. Links to many of the things discussed in this episode can be found in the description at saltgrass.podbean.com. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and please subscribe to our email list to get reminders and updates about the show. This program was made possible with support from the Community Broadcasting Foundation. Find out more at cbf.org.au. This program was produced in partnership with the Mount Alexander Sustainability Group, MASG, and Main FM. If you would like to respond to something discussed on the program, we would love to hear from you. Email us at saltgrasspodcast@gmail.com.
Salt,
Salt of the earth.
salt, salt,
Salt. Grassroots.
grassroots.
Salt of the earth people. Grassroots change. Saltgrass.
Listen to all episodes of Turning the Goldfields Green on saltgrass.podbean.com.